Circulating information is misleading people to believe buying local food is often the best choice and an answer for all problems in the food industry. Buy local campaigns conflate localization with a whole range of goals, including organic produce, better taste, increased health, avoiding GMOs, saving family farms, preserving open space, creating stronger communities, and even lowering taxes. In reality, localization is just one strategy that, when implemented the right way, can have positive change. In regards to the issue of greenhouse gases created in food systems, studies show examples of how localization does not act at a favorable rate and scale to combat climate change.
What we were trying to say in the article about the local trap is that the local trap is a way of substituting an idea, localization, for what you really want, which is a goal like better labor practices or less emissions or a more sustainable way of doing agriculture. And we want people to talk about those goals rather than this idea of localization, which is just a means to an end, just a strategy to those ends that we really want people to be talking about instead. For example, if you want better labor practices in growing grapes in Chile might have much better labor practices than grapes in Eastern Washington. Even though the food miles is a lot greater, the better labor practices for grapes in Chile outweigh the, let's say, poor labor practices for grapes in Eastern Washington. And if you are all about better labor practices, grapes from Chile are a much better option, and you should choose them 100% of the time. And localization doesn't help you think about that.
In a paper on food miles by Christopher Weber and Scott Matthews, we can examine the effectiveness localization has in reducing greenhouse gases. Research showed that most greenhouse gas emissions associated with food happen during the production phase. 83% of emission outputs come from providing 8.1 metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions per year for the consumption needs of the average U.S. household. Transportation represents only 11% of greenhouse gas emissions. This means the most effective way to reduce emissions is to alter eating habits rather than how far our food travels. In this figure from the paper, Graph A shows emissions for producing various food groups meeting the average consumption levels of U.S. households. Graph B shows the emissions from different modes of transport. Graph C shows the climate impact of non-CO2 greenhouse gases during the food production process, and Graph D is the comparative climate impacts of different food groups. The data shows that most of food's climate impact is due to non-CO2 greenhouse gases. Nitrous oxide emissions, mainly due to nitrogen fertilizer application, other soil management techniques, and manure management are prevalent in all food groups, but especially in animal-based groups due to the inefficient transformation of plant energy into animal-based energy. Although it might be worth cutting down food miles from farm to table, for many of us, changing how and what we eat can have a bigger and more immediate effect than changing where it's from. Overall, buying local is a good principle but not a universal rule. All strategies, including localization, need to be tested on all problems in food systems to determine which method has top priority in the planning process. As Bourne and Marx said, just because the current global food system is capitalist, industrial, and unsustainable does not mean that all global systems exhibit these failings or that the current food system always will be so.